This is Retirement Keys with Anthony Congemi from Crescent City Retirement Group. When a part of your financial strategy is out of tune, your long-term goals, your retirement savings, and your legacy can all suffer. With many years of experience in the financial industry, Anthony provides his clients and prospects with the information they need regarding Social Security, retirement income planning, wealth management, and much more. Listen in as we address your financial concerns and provide helpful solutions to put you on the path to achieving your retirement goals. And now, here is Retirement Keys with your host, Anthony Congemi.
Hello, and welcome back to Retirement Keys. My name is Anthony Congemi, and we're so happy to have you join us this lovely Sunday morning. We have our fabulous co-host with us this morning as well, Tony Shore. Actually, Tony made a visit down here from Minnesota. That's where Tony's at. And came down to New Orleans and was able to spend some time with us in our studio here. And so, Tony, it was just so great having you. I mean, what a gift it was to have you down.
Yeah, it was a great visit, and we got a lot done. I think we put in a long day on Friday, but then we just relaxed and saw some of New Orleans on Friday night, and Saturday it was great. Your hospitality was awesome, and what a great staff you have there. But I will say this, the highlight of the trip was seeing your new offices because, wow, those offices are amazing, Anthony. I really like your new offices. So all your clients who are listening to the show and those listeners who want to set up one of those complimentary consultations with you to get a retirement plan and a financial plan in place, they should pick up the phone and give you a call. They can check out the new offices, see the digs there. I think that would be fantastic. It's really great. You've got to even from the one side of the office out the windows, you're on the 6th floor. You got a view of the lake there, don't you?
Real nice. Yeah, we're at the end of Causeway, 3500 North Causeway, and we actually on the 10th floor. And it really does have a nice, and does have a nice view of the lake and a view of Metairie, and you can see the city. Really a pretty office. But interestingly, I just found out that the building doesn't have a 13th floor. And and then come to find out, a lot of buildings in the area don't have a 13th floor. So I guess the architect may have been a little superstitious. Is that what it is, Tony?
That's what it is. In fact, there are many of the big buildings in New York don't have 13 floors, but especially there in New Orleans. And I've read about that actually. I forgot to check that while I was there, but I had heard that. So in a lot of places, buildings don't have 13th floors. It's just a thing, and then there are band names and books that in pop culture, 13th floor elevators. That's the name of a group because most elevators don't go to the 13th floor. So, but yeah, you're on the 10th floor. You're up top there. That's really nice. But that's funny that your building elevator doesn't go to 13. It just goes from 12 to 14, doesn't it?
12 to 14. So if anybody's concerned about buildings with 13 floors, we don't have one here.
That's good to know. Well, you know what, Anthony? We're going to talk about inflation today, and I'm glad this is a great topic you've brought to us.
Yeah, Tony, absolutely. I think we need to be thinking about inflation. I think it's probably on most people's minds. As a matter of fact, I think you probably experienced some of that already, even though it's not showing up in the CPI numbers.
Right.
I think that we're going to be seeing that.
Yep.
And we already are feeling some of the aftermath of inflation, and so we want to speak about it and talk about it today. I think it's a very important and timely topic.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I think that it's going to be a good one. And to be honest, for the last couple of weeks, I've had a feeling that we're going to be talking about inflation coming up because it's been in the news. I've seen a lot of stories about it lately, and I think it's fair to say that few things out there can increase people's feelings of economic anxiety like inflation can, especially those in retirement. I mean, the last thing you need when you're on a retirement budget is rapidly rising prices, right?
You're absolutely right on that, Tony. Let's start today with a very recent U.S. News and World Report article Explainer is the name of the article. Why are fears of high inflation getting worse? As the article notes, Tony, we're seeing a clear rise in prices for gas, automobiles, and even basics like toilet paper, peanut butter, and soda. Simply put, high inflation happens when prices for goods and services don't simply rise at a normal and manageable level, but instead hit the gas pedal and rise so quickly it can make the cost of living more expensive and reduce purchasing power for many people. One piece of good news, however, is that right now many economists don't think we're close to seeing uncontrollably high inflation here in the United States. But at the same time, there's clearly unease among businesses, investors, and even consumers.
Right. And so I think it's really important to note there really is, because we've seen the cost of certain goods just skyrocket. What are some of the issues currently driving these concerns about inflation?
Sure. So one potential reason where we're seeing rise in prices is that in March and April of 2020, the heart of the COVID-19 pandemic, prices took a big dip. Prices are now rising as we slowly inch back into normal life, which means year over year, prices jumps are bigger than many folks are used to. Additionally, there's also global shortage of raw materials and parts that drive up the cost. How builders are scrambling to find the lumber they need for projects, and other manufacturers are having an increasingly hard time finding copper and other commodities. Auto manufacturers need these semiconductors, and many restaurants are even struggling to find menu basics like chicken wings. So really just all kind of started there, Tony, with COVID, with the pandemic last year in March and April, and then the shortage of so many of these items and more.
Well, yeah, and shortages, it's crazy. I mean, I read an article about that, about some areas of the country, it's hard to find chicken and even chicken wings. So I laugh at that one. But you know what I didn't laugh at? Lumber in some areas, Anthony, has risen 300%. I mean, that's just crazy. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
It is.
So, Anthony, what does this mean for the average person's paycheck then?
Well, Tony, it's a great question. Paychecks are nudging up a bit. In April of this year, the average hourly earnings increased by 0.7%, which is a healthy jump for a single month. Additionally, many companies are having a tough time finding workers. In fact, the economy added only 266,000 jobs in April, far fewer than experts expected. More unfilled jobs could potentially mean good news for the American paycheck. So, again, it's a shortage of workers, Tony, and the jobs growth wasn't where we thought it would be, where they thought it would be, and so we've got really a higher demand for these skilled workers, and the good news will be that probably salaries will increase due to it.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I like that. Can you tell our audience what the Federal Reserve has to say about all this? Because I heard they weighed in on this current bout of inflation.
They did, Tony. It's the Fed's job to shield Americans as much as possible from inflation. For his part, Jerome Powell, the Fed's current chair, expects inflation to level off as supply issues are solved. Listeners should also note that the Fed experts have emphasized that one-time or a short-term increase are different than ongoing inflation that comes with constant price jumps.
Well, yeah, and so that certainly makes sense to me, Anthony, and I hope that what that means is our inflation worries may go away sooner rather than later.
Well, that's right, Tony. The Fed is promoting two reasons it thinks our current price increases are likely to be a blip and not a trend. The first reason is because the average American still expects inflation to remain under control because of our recent economic history. The Fed closely tracks inflation expectations, which are a measure of where consumers and markets expect inflation to be heading. For more than 2 decades, there has been very little change in inflation expectations. Simply put, if the public thinks inflation is going to continue hedging around 2%, consumers and businesses are unlikely to adjust how they're behaving even if commodity prices surge. Businesses likely won't charge their consumers higher prices because they expect those surges to be temporary, and workers likely won't demand big wage hikes to counteract higher prices.
Right. Well, and that certainly strikes me as a reason to be at least optimistic. What was the second reason the Fed thinks that these current price increases are likely only temporary?
Well, Tony, the other reason the Fed currently thinks inflation is temporary is because prices have largely been under control for about the last 25 years. Even when unemployment was a staggering low 3.5% in 2019 and forcing higher salaries, consumer prices stayed under the Fed's 2% target. So they've got a lot of history here, Tony, and they feel pretty confident that inflation is going to stay under control.
Well, that sounds good. I hope they're right. They're not always right. We know that, but hopefully it will be under control, and that would be good. And we want to be optimistic about this. Now, this has been an informative show so far today, but we should take a quick break. Before we do, Anthony, let us know, do you have anything else for the listeners?
Well, I just want to thank y'all for tuning in. This is a very important topic, and you know, we all are experiencing higher prices in so many different areas of our lives, and we really need to prepare. We need a plan that prepares if we see inflation and we continue to see the rise of inflation. And so I would just encourage you, it needs to be part of your overall investment strategy, which is overall a part of your overall retirement plan. And I would encourage you, if you don't have a formal retirement plan and you've been listening to the show and you thought, you know, I'd like to get together and really look at our plan and get that second opinion, I'd encourage you to take advantage of this special offer.
You've been listening to our shows and advice on getting your finances in order and creating a retirement income plan that will last. Now is the time to take advantage of our special offer. This is Anthony Kangemi of Crescent City Retirement Group, and we're now offering a complimentary gourmet dinner and retirement planning workshop, The 5 Keys to a Stress-Free Retirement. This is one workshop you won't want to miss. Call in the next 20 minutes for this no-cost offer. Seating is limited. Call Crescent City Retirement Group within the next 20 minutes at 504-828-2171. That number again is 504-828-2171.
And welcome back to Retirement Keys with Anthony Kangemi. I'm your co-host, Tony Shore, and I'm here with our host, the man with the plan, Anthony Kangemi. Anthony, great show today. You've been talking about our current bout of inflation. And we talked about, you know, lumber's on the rise, and there's supply and demand issues that are driving prices up. And you highlighted kind of what we're dealing with. A modest level of inflation, and noted that the Fed doesn't think we have to worry about long-term inflation, at least at this point. And this has been both timely and informative. This is going on right now. And I mean, we've seen the effects in the housing market. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. How do you want to get this segment started?
Well, Tony, for this segment, I thought we should address some of the ways you can protect your finances from inflation. Inflation can be a little scary, especially when you begin factoring in to your financial strategy and your eventual retirement. But the reality is there are some fairly simple planning steps you can take to help guard your wallet against inflation. A Yahoo Finance article, 10 Ways to Beat Inflation, has some great insight. The first step you may be able to take to help protect yourself from inflation comes down to one word: substitution. For example, if you need a new car, focus on a reliable Toyota Camry instead of a much higher price SUV. Or better, still buy a late model used car. You'll get plenty of the latest safety features and bells and whistles, but at a much lower price than if you'd have bought a new one. So there's things that you can do, Tony, to tailor inflation by looking at all of your options and alternatives.
Right. And yeah, you always need to look at everything out there. And if inflation is hitting the auto industry, which we know it is, focusing on a low mileage previously owned vehicle certainly seems like the smart play. And Anthony, I heard, I saw a special on CBS News the other day, and it showed parking lots at the GM plants and the different auto plants with Ford plant with rows and rows, just whole lots of brand new vehicles just sitting there that can't be shipped because they can't get enough computer chips, the processing chips, the processor that runs the cars systems. All cars are run by a computer chip now that controls everything, and there's a shortage of those chips, like you've mentioned. So that's really causing a shortage of new cars, which in turn has caused a shortage of used cars and has driven the price up. But if you have to buy a new car right now, you should look for a low mileage used. Obviously, that's the smart play, isn't it?
Absolutely, Tony. I would say so. And in another area, Tony, as it relates to buying generics is another simple way you can help protect your budget from the threat of inflation. Letting go of the big, well-known brand names as prices rise is an easy step. Thanks to the variety of store brands and other generics, whether it's food or over-the-counter medication, prescriptions, or store brand clothing, you can often get exactly what you need for a lot less. With food and over-the-counter medications, make sure you read the labels to confirm it contains everything you need. Beyond purchasing generics, though, Tony, shopping smart in general is a powerful tool to fight inflation. Make sure dollars stretch as far as possible by purchasing clothing, household items, and electronics are going to last several years. Also, use coupons and buy in bulk whenever possible. As you shift to generics and using coupons, make sure you're tracking your spending. If you just adjust spending strategy, it's important to make sure your hard work is paying off, Tony.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, especially with medications, I think most people have learned as they get older and need more and more prescriptions to go the generic route, and a lot of pharmacies just automatically do that for you, but you need to make sure, especially as prices rise, and we all know that, healthcare and prescription drugs are one area where costs have been rising. This type of thing does cause anxiety, and, coming up with a strategy to fight it is an absolutely great idea. I'm glad you brought this up, Anthony, and you're giving us some great tips, but it's also a really good reason to meet with a financial services professional like yourself. I mean, there's no cost at initial consultation. There's no cost or obligation. Get a plan in place. Sit down and talk. You're a great guy to meet with, Anthony. I want to encourage our listeners to do that. And I think, we're talking about inflation, and that does cause anxiety. So having a plan in place is a great idea, isn't it?
Absolutely, Tony. And remember, inflation can cause anxiety, and it can be a major pain in the neck. But there are solutions. Now, you mentioned working with a financial services professional a moment ago, which is good because the next way you may be able to hedge a bit against inflation is to invest. We avoid getting into investments on our show because we simply don't have the time to adequately address all of the pros and cons and nuances. So if investing is part of your strategy, it's essential to work with a financial services professional who will be there to help calmly guide you through the process for years to come. Tony, we talk a lot about an investment strategy, and in our investment approach, we really look at three aspects to investing. We want to look at liquidity, emergency money. We look at our structured income plan. And then, of course, we look at growth. And so it's real important to not just invest, but to have an investment strategy. And as you know, Tony, that is a big part of an overall retirement plan.
Oh, yeah, it's huge. And I think that's great. I'm glad you bring that up. Now, obviously it's human nature to make emotional financial decisions, but you don't want to do that with your finances or your investments. And people tend to start doing that if inflation starts skyrocketing. But someone like yourself, as you mentioned, an experienced financial services professional, they can help you make reasoned decisions instead of overly emotional ones, right?
Absolutely. That's a great perspective. Purchasing a home is another good way to offer some protection against inflation. The article notes that home prices have historically kept up with inflation. Depending on where you live, buying may be cheaper than renting, and your mortgage rate may look even better in the future as rents continue to rise. However, don't buy a home if the payments and maintenance would leave you cash poor, if you may potentially need to suddenly move for work, if you can't stay in the home for at least 5 years, and if you aren't interested in taking on upkeep tasks. So, homeowner ship can be very good, but you've got to look at your overall situation there, Tony.
Yeah. And speaking of buying a home, the home prices have been on the rise for sure. What's a good borrowing strategy during times of rising inflation?
Well, the simple answer is that inflation is trending up. Don't wait to borrow because rising inflation can include rising interest rates. If taking out a loan is on your horizon, make sure to keep a close eye on inflation. And if it begins rising in a way that suggests a trend rather than a blip, make your move.
And, inflation has been getting a lot of attention, obviously, in the news. We talked about that because it is on the rise. I think today's show has been great. We've been discussing how it can affect your financial strategy. What do you have for us in our final segment, Anthony?
Well, I thought in our final segment, we'd focus specifically on how you can combat inflation if you're already retired. An article from The Balance titled 3 Ways to Plan for Inflation in Retirement has some really useful information. Interestingly, the article explains that it's often considered a rule of thumb that retirees will need a permanently increasing income source to maintain their purchasing power in retirement. But it also notes that studies of retiree spending habits paint a different picture. To begin, your retirement can largely be broken down into 3 phases: the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. During your go-go years, which is your early retirement, you're going to be out in the world traveling, hitting the links, fishing, and doing all the other things you enjoy. This also means you're out there spending money. Depending on your health, the go-go years are generally ages 55 to 75. Your next phase, the slow-go years, is generally ages 70 to 85, depending on your health. In this stage, you're home more and shopping less. As the article notes, spending in the inflation-adjusted terms typically declines during this phase. Finally, in the no-go years, where your spending on health care replaces what you previously spent on entertainment. The inflation-adjusted terms, the article explains that spending ticks back up during this phase.
Now, we're out of time for today's show. It flew by. But before we go, why don't you let our listeners know how they can get a hold of you to set up that complimentary, no-cost, no-obligation consultation and get their own plan in place?
Absolutely, Tony. So we're at 3500 North Causeway. We have a beautiful location right here in Metairie. We also have our location on the North Shore, and we're in Houma for Lafourche and Terrebonne parishes. So really this whole southeast area. But if you don't have a formal retirement plan, if you don't have a plan, an income plan that does adjust for inflation and consider inflation inside of your plan. It's so important to have that, especially now. But in our retirement plans, Tony, you know that we really cover the 5 key areas that we think are very important, and that is estate and legacy planning, healthcare planning, investment strategy, income planning, and taxes. And really, Tony, when you look at a holistic plan like that, you see that all of this works together. This idea of piecemeal planning today is really going to be hard to compete with a holistic plan that puts it all in one place. And we really pride ourselves on that type of planning. So I would encourage you, if you would like a second opinion, you would like to see how your plan would look, take advantage of our offer. Let us know, and we'd be happy to get with you via phone, through Zoom, or in person. But we'd love to visit with you and give you that second opinion. And as Rami would say, Tony, who's a good friend of ours, as you know, if you're going to get a second opinion on your health, why not get a second opinion on your wealth? And that's what we're offering you. So please take advantage of this offer.
Thank you for listening to Retirement Keys. Don't pay too much for taxes or retire without a sound income plan. For more information, please contact Anthony Congemi at Crescent City Retirement Group. Call 504-828-2171 or visit the website at crescentcityretirement.com. All matters discussed during this show are for informational purposes only. Each individual situation may vary, and the opinions expressed here may not apply to everyone. Materials presented are believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations can be made as to its accuracy. All ideas and information should be discussed in detail with one of our qualified representatives prior to implementation. Anthony Congemi and Crescent City Retirement Group are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency.